Dad gave my sister everything. Then a lawyer revealed Grandpa's secret will, and her fake smile shattered when I got it all. My dad gave my sister everything. His house, his business, his entire legacy. But then the lawyer pulled out Grandpa's secret will, and her fake smile shattered when I got it all. Picture this. I was stuck in a ridiculously stuffy lawyer's office in Richmond, Virginia, listening to my father's final wishes being read aloud like some boring grocery list. The polished wood desk was a mirror, and all I could see was how utterly lost I looked. Across from me, my older sister Sarah sat, her smile just perfectly sweet. You know the kind, all apple pie on the surface, but with pure calculation simmering underneath. The lawyer, a skinny guy who looked like he'd spent decades squashed between law books, cleared his throat for the grand revelation. And just as I expected, everything that mattered went to Sarah. The house we grew up in, with its wraparound porch and creaking floors that whispered stories of 4 generations. Dad's booming carpentry business, built on 40 years of sawdust, sweat, and customers who trusted our family name. Even those old, comfy living room chairs that had molded perfectly to Dad's shape over the years. All hers. And me? Not a peep. Not a single mention. It was like I was invisible ink on our family tree. The lawyer snapped the folder shut, and for a heart-stopping moment, I honestly thought that was it. After 22 years of being someone's kid, I had been completely written out of the story. Talk about a participation trophy. I didn't even get to participate. My sister's reaction was instant and, honestly, a performance worthy of an Oscar. She gasped, clutched her manicured hand to her mouth, and shook her head as if she'd witnessed a tragedy. But her eyes? They were already calculating how fast she could liquidate Dad's entire legacy. It was like watching someone try to look sorrowful at a funeral while secretly planning the after-party. The hush in that room was thicker than molasses. I just sat there, feeling like I'd been erased from existence. Then, the lawyer cleared his throat again. Apparently, there was more. He pulled out another document, this one older, yellowed at the edges like an antique treasure map. His whole demeanor shifted from business as usual to something resembling genuine surprise. It turned out my grandfather, Paul, that old fox with a mischievous glint in his eye, who always seemed to see so much more than I did. He'd been playing chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. 5 years prior, he'd established a separate living trust, completely independent of Dad's will. The trust declared that upon my father's death, a specific property would automatically pass to me, but only if I was over 21 and had finished college. Grandpa Paul had left me a stretch of sun-baked land in Floyd County, Virginia, along with an ancient barn that looked like it had died during the Reagan administration. The lawyer handed me a rusty key, as if he were awarding me the crown jewels, and explained that this inheritance was legally binding, completely untouched by anything Dad had decided. My sister's face went through more emotions than a theater major's final exam. Shock, uncertainty, fury, and then, finally, that calculating expression I knew so well. She leaned forward, her perfectly painted nails tapping against the mahogany table like she was typing out her arguments. Her statements dripped with phony concern, which, let me tell you, is far worse than any outright insult. She scoffed, "It's just weeds and a pile of rubbish. What are you planning to do with abandoned acreage, Aiden? Become some kind of gentleman farmer?" The way she said farming made it sound like an infectious disease. There wasn't any fury in her voice, just a sophisticated disdain that cut deeper than any yelling match ever could. Her comments contained no wrath, just exquisite contempt. That became my catalyst. Because here's the thing about being underestimated your entire life. Eventually it becomes your fuel. I walked out of that office with nothing but a rusty key and a head bursting with questions. I was 22, fresh out of college with a business administration degree that at that moment felt about as valuable as a Titanic ticket after it hit the iceberg. My entire worldly assets fit into one beaten-up suitcase. A few faded photographs, some spare clothes, a t-shirt that had seen more life drama than a soap opera, and exactly $358 in my wallet. Enough to buy some ramen noodles and maybe a tiny dream on clearance. The 2-hour drive to Floyd County felt like I was being transported to another universe. The mountains stretched out before me like green velvet, and the air grew crisper with every mile. When I finally pulled up to what was supposed to be my fortune, I had to laugh. The barn looked like it was held together with hope, duct tape, and sheer stubbornness. But something about the place, despite its decay, suggested opportunities rather than problems. Maybe it was the way the afternoon sun touched the worn wood, or how the mountains seemed to wrap around the small valley like protective arms. Or maybe, just maybe, I was desperate enough to see magic where others saw only rot. Grandpa Paul was the only person who had ever truly listened to my stories. While everyone else was focused on practical matters like career choices and mortgage rates, he'd sit with me by the creek, spinning tales about ancient days and the land's hidden potential. He saw something in me that I didn't even perceive in myself. He used to say something I always dismissed as old guy philosophy. Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in the most unremarkable places. I spent the first hour just wandering around, kicking at weeds, trying to imagine what Grandpa Paul had seen here. The barn tilted to one side like an elderly person with a bad hip, and the roof had more holes than a national budget. But beneath all that neglect, I sensed something sturdy. Good bones, as Dad would have said about a piece of furniture worth refurbishing. The barn smelled of rodents, dust, and decades of stored hopes. I started searching, moving rusted equipment and moth-eaten hay bales, when I noticed something that made my heart race. Tucked away in a corner, almost hidden beneath a tarp that had definitely seen better days, was an old wooden drawer. It looked handmade, with the kind of attention to detail that screamed of love, not just necessity. This thing practically cried out to me, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment my entire life. Inside that drawer, wrapped in oilcloth like priceless treasures, I found 3 items that would change everything. First, a yellowed envelope with lettering I couldn't quite read, a bizarre, flowing script that resembled ancient incantations. Second, a small container of dried, onion-like bulbs that seemed innocuous enough to be ignored. And third, a sealed packet with handwriting I did recognize. The inscription on the outside was in Grandpa Paul's unmistakable hand, that same meticulous calligraphy I remembered from birthday cards and fishing trip notes. For Aiden, when you are ready to see what others cannot, do not open without serious intentions. The paper felt weighty in my hands, carrying more than just words. I sat there on an overturned milk crate, surrounded by the ghosts of forgotten harvests, and opened the letter with trembling fingers. Grandpa Paul's calligraphy filled the page as if he were speaking directly from beyond, each word chosen with the care of a skilled artisan. The letter read like a declaration of faith. These bulbs are truly gold, Aiden. Saffron crocus is the most valuable spice on the planet, but only for those who know how to wait, recognize value in the unnoticed, and are willing to spend their soul. Don't forget why we're here in these Appalachian hills. Look for a spring near the old oak. It will provide life. Your grandfather, Paul, I have faith in you. Remember, my boy, land is the best bank if you understand how to use it. I had to read those words 3 times before they truly registered. Saffron bulbs. My grandfather had bequeathed me saffron bulbs and a treasure map for success. Most people would have laughed. Most individuals would have probably tossed the entire mess out and driven back to civilization. But here's what I discovered about rock bottom. It's actually a fairly good foundation to build on. When you have nothing to lose, everything starts to look like an opportunity. Those seemingly insignificant tiny bulbs symbolize something far more potent than agricultural speculation. They were my grandfather's words of encouragement, his belief that I could turn dust into gold. That night, I slept on the barn floor, my jacket crumpled into a makeshift cushion, listening to a symphony of country sounds I'd forgotten existed, crickets, distant owls, and the whispering wind through trees that had stood since before my great-grandfather's birth. It worked better than any white noise machine or meditation app. I woke with the sunrise, something city living had conditioned me to dread. But there was something about this place that resonated with natural rhythms I had no idea I still possessed. The morning light streaming through the barn's gaps created patterns on the floor that appeared almost artistic, as if the structure itself was trying to paint me a picture of possibility. During my first full day on the farm, I began to grasp what Grandpa Paul had observed. This wasn't just abandoned farmland. It was land wrapped in neglect, waiting for someone with a vision and determination to unlock its potential. Despite years of disuse, the soil was still rich, as I discovered when I probed beneath the surface weeds. The old oak tree he mentioned in his letter stood watch in the center of what had once been a proper field. And just as he had predicted, I found the spring near that oak, hidden beneath years of vegetation, but still flowing pure and cool. It was like finding hidden treasure, only this treasure would keep giving indefinitely. Standing in that field, holding those priceless bulbs and feeling the weight of my grandfather's faith, I made a pledge. To him, to the earth, and to myself. I would show everyone that what they considered useless could be transformed into something extraordinary. I would show them that sometimes the most essential inheritance doesn't fit on a financial statement. The bitter taste of that lawyer's office was slowly fading, replaced by something that tasted strangely like hope, mixed with pure, unadulterated determination. I had my grandfather's property, his wisdom, his mysterious saffron bulbs, and most importantly, his steadfast conviction in my ability to create something amazing out of what others considered ordinary. Those seemingly worthless tiny bulbs were about to become my chance at redemption, my gateway to a whole new life. Perhaps they represented what most people would call blind faith, but I was convinced. And sometimes that's all it takes to spark a revolution, or at least prove your sister wrong, which felt like a pretty solid start. As I stood there watching the sunset behind the Appalachian peaks, painting the sky with colors that would make any Instagram filter jealous, I couldn't stop smiling. Everyone else thought they knew how much my inheritance was worth. They saw abandoned acreage and a dilapidated barn. But I was starting to see something else entirely. The foundation of aspirations and the raw material for unimaginable tomorrows. The real work was about to begin, and I had a feeling my grandfather's final lesson was just getting started. Tomorrow brought a wake-up call that was far more powerful than my college alarm clock. Saffron is not for the lazy. This wasn't just a weekend gardening effort or a pretty little hobby farm that Instagram could romanticize. This was agricultural warfare. And I was about to discover that the land doesn't care about your emotions or your college degree. The first thing I learned about growing saffron is that it demands everything from you. Patience, backbreaking labor, and information you didn't even know existed. I was digging soil, calculating pH levels, and researching drainage patterns as if I were preparing for a NASA expedition to Mars. My hands developed calluses that resembled abstract art painted in anguish, and my legs ached from continual standing, as if I were working 2 jobs at a factory. Those initial weeks were tough in ways I hadn't expected. I was ripping rocks from the ground that seemed to have been set there by giants, digging furrows with my bare hands until they bled, and spending my evenings reading obscure agricultural magazines about saffron types I'd never heard of. Crocus and corm proliferation became my new language. This was my personal battlefield, and I was absolutely determined to win the war. Every morning, I'd wake up before sunrise, not because I wanted to, but because something inside of me had fundamentally shifted. The earth was now making the decisions, and I was learning to listen. I'd stumble out of the barn where I'd set up a makeshift bedroom, grab some instant coffee that tasted like liquid disappointment, and get back to work on transforming this forgotten bit of Appalachian dirt into something truly special. During those long days of backbreaking labor, I found myself recalling Grandpa Paul's words from our fishing trips by the lake. He used to say something that made more sense now than ever before. Land always pays back those who respect it. It's like an old friend. The more you give, the more you get. His voice became my compass, my silent companion in this insane undertaking that everyone else said was doomed to fail. The old guy had grasped the concept of the relationship between human effort and natural reward that most people take a lifetime to comprehend. Every blister on my hands, every ache in my back, and every drop of sweat that fell to the ground felt like I was depositing money into a dividend-paying account. But while the physical labor was difficult, dealing with the local farming community was downright hilarious. The folks at the Rusty Mug, the local cafe that functioned as the unofficial headquarters for agricultural news, looked at me as if I were some odd species that had crawled out from beneath a rock. Their collective wisdom distilled down to barely hidden derision, masked as polite concern. They'd sit there, sipping their coffee, making observations as subtle as a freight train. Comments about the city boy planting mystery bulbs for soup, or whether the recent rain had harmed my head. One particularly charming fellow joked he might be looking for trouble in all the wrong places, as if saffron cultivation was some sort of dangerous pastime for those with too much time and too little wisdom. I simply smiled and nodded, keeping my thoughts to myself. Let them laugh, I reasoned. After all, the best laugh is usually the last one. These were decent people at heart, but they were also creatures of habit, having grown the same crops in the same manner for generations. Innovation was not their strong suit, and I couldn't blame them for being dubious of something they hadn't seen before. Being the first individual in Floyd County history to undertake commercial saffron farming would either make me a pioneer or serve as a cautionary tale. The jury was still out on which category I belonged to, but each day that went by without giving up felt like a small win over the doubters. Just as I was beginning to believe that my only important discussions would be with my blistering hands, fate decided to throw me a curveball that changed everything. Her name was Sarah, and she appeared as if from a turning point scene. Not overly dramatic, just right. The kind of presence that changes things without making a big deal about it. Sarah was a Virginia Tech agricultural student who had arrived in rural Floyd County to fulfill an internship requirement. She wasn't just another assistant. She was a ray of true sunshine in a world that had been mostly cloudy for months. Her eyes were filled with curiosity about everything agricultural, and she believed in my crazy saffron project more than I did. Where the local farmers saw soup ingredients and questionable lifestyle choices, Sarah saw potential gold. She glanced at my meticulously planted bulbs and immediately started discussing business options, export potential, and what she referred to as artisanal agricultural products. She spoke my grandfather's language of possibilities, but with a modern vocabulary perfect for someone who valued both heritage and innovation. She became more than just a cheerleader or assistant. Sarah was my intellectual partner, the person who could see the vision I was trying to create and helped make it a reality. She embodied that ideal statement: vision without action is just hallucination, but action without vision is a nightmare. We had both, and the combination felt unstoppable. One of the first practical tasks Sarah assisted me with was fixing the old spring near the oak tree that Grandpa Paul mentioned in his letter. The villagers had forgotten it existed, but she approached it like an archaeological dig. Water quality tests, correct legal registration of water rights, and environmental impact assessments. She transformed my grandfather's cryptic treasure plan into practical, modern agriculture. She knelt down beside the spring and said, "The land is breathing, Aiden." Her words sounded like a prayer. She knew what my grandfather was trying to tell me, but she was able to convert his old-school thinking into modern, practical language. Sarah also brought something completely unexpected: social media knowledge. She began chronicling our progress, making videos about what she dubbed gold on American soil. Her content was more than just attractive photographs. It was storytelling that linked ancient farming knowledge to modern agricultural innovation. She made our tiny saffron experiment feel like it was part of something much broader, rather than just one guy trying to prove his sister wrong. The videos started to attract attention. Not exactly viral, but there was consistent interest from individuals who respected the story we were telling. Comments poured in from fellow farmers, culinary connoisseurs, and people who realized that true quality requires time and dedicated work. It felt like we were creating something more than just a crop, a community of people who believed in doing things well. Then, something extraordinary began to happen. Those small saffron bulbs that I'd planted with more hope than knowledge started to show signs of life. Small green shoots appeared first, followed by delicate purple blossoms, resembling tiny stars poking through the dirt. Each fresh bloom felt like a personal win, confirmation that my grandfather's confidence had not been misplaced, and that all those weeks of backbreaking labor had resulted in something worthwhile. I'd get up every morning and rush out to check on the progress, counting new blossoms like a miser counts pennies. Sarah would meet me there most mornings, and we'd walk among the rows, talking about harvest scheduling, processing techniques, and marketing ideas. Those early morning chats, surrounded by purple flowers and the dawn mist, were among the happiest I'd experienced in years. But just as things seemed to be going well, my history made an unexpected entrance. My sister arrived at the property like a black cloud moving in before a storm. She emerged from her fancy SUV, dressed in clothes that cost more than my monthly shopping budget, with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She surveyed the property as if she were preparing it for auction, her gaze lingering on the purple blossoms with scarcely veiled calculation. This was not a familial visit motivated by sisterly care or curiosity about my farming experiment. This was reconnaissance, and I could feel the tension emanating from her like hot asphalt in August. It didn't take long to find out why she had come to my little corner of Virginia. Sarah's Gold on American Soil videos had gained significant traction, with hundreds of thousands of views and attention from food bloggers and agricultural journalists. My sister had always been brilliant at sniffing out opportunities, and she had clearly spotted something that smelled exactly like profit. The conversation that followed was a masterclass in deception disguised as a family issue. She began discussing partnership ideas, merging our resources, and utilizing her business connections to help grow the firm. Her voice was pure honey, but I could taste the venom behind each syllable. Then came the legal threats. She started waving papers around, discussing technical problems in Grandpa Paul's trust, citing a clerical error with the witness signatures or the notarization date. The implication was clear. Give me a share of your success, or I'll complicate your legal situation. Her exact words were delivered with that perfect blend of false concern and implied menace that she had honed over the years. Something about how I couldn't possibly want to get into a court war with my own sister, right? Perhaps we could figure something out that would benefit both of us. Her lovely voice was more harmful than any yelling bout could have been. But here's the thing about performing hard labor for months and creating something out of nothing. It alters you in unexpected ways. I wasn't the confused 22-year-old sitting in a lawyer's office anymore. I'd grown real calluses, both physical and emotional. I'd discovered the thrill of producing something valuable through sheer effort and determination. I stared at her, then at Sarah, and finally at the purple flowers, which symbolized months of sweat, trust, and persistence. Even I was astonished by my response, which was both confident and strong. I informed her I wasn't the same kid anymore, that this land meant more than just real estate or an economic prospect. This was my chance, my inheritance, my choice, and I was not giving it up to anyone, and certainly not to someone who would cheat me when I had absolutely nothing. Her expression changed abruptly and unpleasantly. The phony care vanished like makeup in the rain, replaced by the cold calculation I recognized. From our childhood, she knew that her normal tactics wouldn't work, that our relationship had evolved in unexpected ways. Sarah didn't say anything, but her presence screamed louder than any legal argument my sister could present. She stood like a root buried deep in the hard Appalachian soil, unmoving and immovable. Her quiet strength reminded me that I was no longer fighting this battle alone. After my sister drove away, spinning gravel in her luxury SUV and leaving behind the kind of angry energy that takes hours to disperse, Sarah and I lingered among the purple flowers, processing what had happened. The confrontation had been uncomfortable, but it had also provided immense clarity. I had drawn a line in the soil, literally and metaphorically, and there was no turning back. We spent the rest of the day in peaceful calm, tending to the saffron plants and preparing for the harvest, which was still several weeks away. The physical effort felt soothing after the emotional intensity of the morning, and I found myself reflecting on how much I had changed since acquiring this farm. That evening, as we watched the sun set behind the mountains, transforming the sky into a palette of colors rivaling our purple flowers, Sarah made an observation that resonated deeply with me. She said that finding the optimal fertilizer for growth isn't always easy. Plants, like people, she stated, grow stronger when forced to struggle for what they want. The first significant test was behind us, but I had a hunch bigger problems were on the way. Success has a way of attracting attention, both positive and negative, and we were only just getting started on this adventure. The saffron was growing. The videos were gathering traction, and my sister had realized her little brother would no longer be pushed around. But for that moment, sitting amid the purple flowers with someone who shared my vision, anything seemed possible. The hard work was paying off, both physically and figuratively. The soil was responding to our care. The plants were flourishing, and I was becoming the person my grandfather had predicted I would be. The path to genuine gold was proving to be as difficult as he had warned, but it was also more rewarding than I had anticipated. The fields were blooming, and so was I, not into someone new, but into who I was supposed to be. The fields were flourishing, but there was also worry. My sister's legal threats were more than just empty words carried on the mountain air. They were serious issues that required real solutions. Sarah and I realized we had to act quickly before her lawyers discovered some loophole to exploit, some technicality that could undo everything Grandpa Paul had meticulously built. We decided to take a road trip to Richmond, which felt like a combination of detective work and legal archaeology. Our goal was simple: locate someone who could attest to my grandfather's actual intentions and end the inheritance dispute once and for all. The trip across Virginia's beautiful countryside allowed us time to plan, but largely we tried to stay positive while bracing for the worst. That's when we met Mr. Harold Patton, a notary who'd been in Richmond since the Carter administration. This guy was old school in the greatest way possible, the type of expert who kept thorough records and remembered his clients as individuals, rather than just signatures on documents. When we mentioned Grandpa Paul's name, his wrinkled face brightened with genuine familiarity. Mr. Patton pulled out files that looked like they belonged in a museum, but his recall was razor-sharp. He told us stories about my grandfather that I hadn't heard before, about how the old guy had been quite meticulous in establishing that trust. According to Harold, Grandpa Paul had specifically stated that he was seeking for the boy who saw with his heart instead of his eyes. These words struck me more deeply than I expected. My granddad saw something in me that I was unaware of at the time. Mr. Patton's testimony was exactly what we needed: official verification that my inheritance was substantial and legally binding. It was a temporary win, but we both knew the real war was just beginning. Someone will always want to take a bite out of your pie, especially if it becomes profitable. The relief I felt while driving back toward Floyd County was immense. We had dealt with the legal threat. The saffron was flourishing, and for the first time in months, I felt optimistic about this strange venture. Sarah was planning for the forthcoming crop, discussing processing processes and market strategies that made our small enterprise appear nearly professional. However, reality has a way of reminding you that victory laps should definitely be saved for when you truly cross the finish line. We were about an hour outside Floyd, just beginning to see the familiar lights of town glimmering in the distance, like scattered promises, when we witnessed something that turned my blood cold. Smoke. This wasn't the delicate wisps you get from a fireplace or a controlled burn in the distance. This was heavy, black, pungent smoke rising from exactly the direction of my property. The type of smoke that indicates that something vital is being destroyed. My heart fell to my stomach and remained there. As we got closer, it became clear that this wasn't a random brush fire or a neighboring farmer's burn pile. This smoke was pouring from my crops, my dreams, and all I had been working on for months. The air seemed to get heavier with each mile, carrying the odor of ruin and betrayal. Sarah grabbed my hand as we drove into the driveway, both of us marveling at what used to be rows of meticulously maintained saffron plants. It now looked like a war zone, with scorched earth strewn across what had been vibrant purple flowers just that morning. The fire crew was still there, hosing down hot spots and ensuring that the flames did not spread to the adjacent woodland. The fire chief, a tired-looking man with sunken cheeks and sorrowful eyes, verified what we already suspected but didn't want to believe. This was not an accident. Someone had deliberately started this fire, using what appeared to be an accelerant to ensure it burned hot and quickly. His exact words were colder than the ashes that still smoldered in my field. Someone wanted to make sure your saffron wasn't welcome here. Whoever did this had been watching, waiting for the day we weren't present. The timing was not coincidental. It was premeditated malice. Standing there among the debris of months of backbreaking work, I felt something inside me snap in a manner I had never felt before. This wasn't just property destruction or agricultural sabotage. It was someone attempting to destroy my aspirations before they could completely develop. The violation felt deeply personal, causing my hands to shake with wrath and powerlessness. That's when I remembered Mr. Higgs, our neighbor, the old farmer who lived about a quarter-mile down the road, had been giving me odd looks since I started working the field. His face was a mix of envy and hatred, and I had been too preoccupied with my own task to really register it. Now, standing among the ashes of my fantasies, I remembered something Mr. Patton had spoken back in Richmond, something about my father making informal pledges to neighbors regarding this land before my grandfather took over with the official trust. Mr. Higgs must have expected to pay a low price for this land when my father sold it, only to see some city lad